Fabulous. Well, again, thank you so much for having me today. It is an actual honor to be here. Um, I realized as it was getting closer, I was getting a little bit more nervous. And I think it's just after listening to the two presenters prior, I'm actually very excited about what I heard them talk about. And you'll see why in just a few minutes when I tell my stories. So first of all, you may notice something a little different about me, and that is I'm not from around these parts, as they would say. I actually grew up in the tiny fishing town that you see on your screen now. It's called Westport, Washington. Its claim to fame was it used to be the salmon fishing capital of the world when I grew up there. So I'm not going to just tell you one story. I'm actually going to tell you several small stories. And I'm also not going to go into the details of my sexual abuse. What's really important for me today is that you hear my passion about not keeping secrets and why we have to break the cycle. And hopefully my story will help drive that point home. So what I ask of you today is just listen with all your heart and maybe at the end do some reflection and, if appropriate, act. So with that, I'll get started. So for my first question I have for you all is, do you have a secret? Now, everyone has a little secret. Maybe we binge watch those things we don't really want to tell anybody. We've stole a candy bar back in our teens. Maybe we've cheated on a test. Maybe it's a bigger secret. You're having an affair. Maybe you've done some illegal criminal activity. But for me, I held a secret that was so bad, it was tormenting two little children, but I had no idea because I was just a child myself. So you may be wondering, what does Glenn Close and Ted Danson have anything to do with a survivor trauma story? You may recognize Glenn Close if you're familiar with Fatal Attraction. She was the person who boiled the bunny. And Ted Danson used to be on Cheers, and now he's on a show called The Good Place. These two are important to my story because they had the courage to act in a show back in 1984, January 9th to be specific. They were in a show showed on the evening primetime spot, which is also a little provocative, and it was about sexual abuse, and it's called Something About Amelia. Interestingly, you can still get this show on YouTube, but it has what my daughter would call that strange color to it. However, back to Ted and Glenn. Their bravery gave me courage to do something I knew I had to do after watching this show. This is what I call my God moment or my 2x4 moment. After watching the show, it was literally like I was hit over the head with a 2x4 and told I needed to get up and go tell my secret. And that's exactly what I did. I walked into the room where my mom was getting ready, and I told her my secret. Soon after, and within hours, we had a social worker and two detectives at our house, and they were gathering more information about my secret. They asked me to do something that today would probably be pretty controversial. They asked me if the next day I would ride with them about a 40-minute drive to go talk to my stepsister and stepbrother at their school and see if we all shared the same secret. I got in that car with no other support, just the police officers and the social worker, and I met my stepsister and stepbrother in a tiny little room off the cafeteria of the school. I can remember that moment as if it was yesterday. They were so excited to see me because I hadn't seen them in a while. And as I sat down with them, with tears in my eyes, I had to ask them if we shared the secret. And this is still difficult for me to talk about today. Their answer devastated me, and it probably clearly still devastates me today. Their answer was yes, we shared the same secret. Robert had been sexually abusing all three of us. He was our stepfather. He was my stepfather from the age of about the time I was born until 11, when he left my mom and moved in with what I call the littles mom. He literally left my bed for theirs. On this day, I was 14 and they were just 7 and 10. What happened next is I was asked if I would be willing to go to court and testify. The littles were too young, and I was the age, after already telling my story now to the police, they felt I could handle this at 14 years old. With Robert, our stepfather, just sitting feet from me in the courtroom, I did take the stand and I told the story of my abuse. And I testified on all of it, on behalf of all of us. What you see in this picture is what I call my bright eyes on the left, and that's me at about 2 years old. And then on the right, I call my sad eyes, which is me at about probably 4. And I'm guessing by the look of this picture, the abuse started happening in between these two pictures. So I testified for the littles, I testified for the bright-eyed girl and the sad-eyed girl. But here's the thing, I wasn't the only one telling my secret that day. Robert's sister had been sexually abused by him all through their adolescence, and she never told her secret. She never told, having no idea that he could have been abusing me, and I never told, because I never could have imagined he had abused them, because we were all kids. But when we know better, we do better. And that's what I'm trying to do here today. I'm telling my story because I think there are so many other people out there that haven't found their voice yet, or they're just starting on their journey and they need people to stand up for them. So what happens when your abuser gets sent to prison? Now, that I don't have enough time to go into that story. That's for another time. But he went to prison, but not for a very long time. However, I went on with my life. And I was a typical teenager, trying to get the best grades. In fact, I was a straight A student. I held 2 jobs at any given time. I really tried to do and be the best I could be. Now, if you're feeling unsafe and you're a teenager, what's the best thing you can do? Well, marry a United States Marine, of course. And that's exactly what I did when I was 18. Now, I knew I had to tell him my secret. Telling anybody about your abuse story is scary. Telling United States Marine is really scary. And all I'll say about that is it's a good thing Robert was in prison by the time I had told him. So what did our life look like? We had 2 children, a boy and a girl. I had a good job. We moved to Arizona. We started a company. We lived from the outside a very normal life. And actually, even from the inside, it looked great. We got along well, although we went to some counseling for what I would consider his communication issues. And this whole time, I hadn't gotten counseling, not when I was in high school and not mostly during our marriage. If we went to counseling, it was about our marital issues. We really didn't get into the trauma of my childhood. However, this scratches and dents and the wounds in my heart did start to show. And later into our marriage, I was unfaithful, and my family found out about it. After trying to survive this, we did decide we would get a divorce, but we had made a decision together that we would see a therapist so we could ensure we did it well for us and for our children. That decision changed the next part of my life. We saw a therapist who was very clear with me: get help for those wounds of the sexual abuse, or you will probably suffer through a lot of relationship issues and other issues as you continue to get older. I agreed with him, and he gave me a card of a place that was pretty local to where I lived. The other gift I received was from my husband. He gave me the gift of forgiveness, and he gave me the gift of support. Although we still moved forward with our divorce, he said he would support me in any help I needed to get. The next piece was even more difficult. I had never told my children, because by now I was great at keeping a secret. And it didn't make sense to me to tell my kids about the abuse and have to have them imagine what went on for me. So I just never told them. In the end, it was probably a mistake, as now I had to tell them because our life was going to change dramatically. But now they were upset with me. Our family was imploding. And as I told them, they had compassion, and they were 18 and 16 at the time. They had compassion, but they agreed that it was no excuse for any of my behavior, and I had to agree with them as well. I made them a promise that I would get help, and that is what I did. Okay, so this is a place called Sierra Tucson in Arizona. I was fortunate to get to go into this. Into this program. It's an inpatient program, and it's an intensive program, and I was there for 30 days. My best friend dropped me off, and I think she probably knew what was coming more than I did. No phone, no computer, visitors on Sunday. And the job here was to work on myself. That's what I got to do for 30 days. And it was the hardest 30 days of my life. Make no mistake. But it was also the best 30 days of my life. I was there with 75 other people, and those people would come in and out based on their time there. People who were suffering from drug addiction, eating disorders, depression, pain management, but several people who were there just to heal from the wounds of trauma, and that's why I was there. I didn't even take a sleeping tablet. And interestingly enough, I was the only one who didn't line up for a sleeping tablet at night. My resilience was strong, and I was dedicated to getting support because I did not want to give any power back to my abuser. With the helps of the programs you see on the screen, this was all part of my 30 days. And one of the reflections I want to make about moving to Northern Ireland, which I will tell you more about that and why I moved here. One of the reflections is when I got here, I realized there were limited options to get support for trauma survivors. And so my experience of going to Sierra Tucson, I know how fortunate and lucky I was to be able to walk into an intensive program and have a dedicated time to go through all these different programs. The sign, "You are a miracle," this is the exact sign that you see when you leave Sierra Tucson when you're driving out. And I believe a miracle did happen. One of the things that was writing on my heart that I had no idea was the guilt I felt for the littles. I had already forgiven Robert years and years ago. I'd made that decision when I was a teenager that I would forgive him because I did not want to live with any hatred in my heart. Who I had not forgiven is myself. And that was causing me to act in ways that were against my value system and not appropriate. So when I left here, it was a miracle, and I felt ready to tackle new things. Now, rest assured, I still see a therapist today, and things still come up, but this set me on my recovery journey. I love a good quote. I get teased about it, but I do love a good quote, so I had to throw a couple in here. Brené Brown talks a lot about shame, and this is a quote from her that I'll let you read on the screen. A lot of these things you're seeing, eating disorders, addiction, resentment, you would have seen in Siobhan's presentation as well, things that start to show up when we are wounded by trauma. What was interesting for me and why I really wasn't pushed to get help prior to almost 40 years old, this was not me. I didn't have these things. I was high functioning. And so none of this brought me to my knees. None of this brought me to a therapist. However, I had a lot of coping skills that I did not know were related. The first thing was I could shop and shop and shop. And if it was a sale, I could shop even more. I had a closet full of clothes that I could never wear, and I was always busy trying to give them away. I worked a lot of hours. I probably worked 60 hours a week, and I also traveled for my job. When I wasn't traveling for my job, we traveled as a family. I would be as far as being on a trip, maybe a vacation, and planning for the next vacation. I just could not sit still. I was a flirt, and I had a jealous streak at times, which was ridiculous considering I was the flirt. So these are just some things that were showing up that I could not even realize that where some of that was coming from. But I was trying to fill a hole that was so deep, it just really was not able to be filled up until I got some support. So I want to give some thought here, and this is where I'd like some of your reflection. Breaking the silence, as you can see from my own story, is key. If we don't start breaking the silence and telling our secrets in a safe place, we're going to continue to see this over and over in our families, in our schools, in our churches. So this is some examples of things I've heard both in our trauma groups when I was in treatment program, in support groups, and I've had people say these things to me. And I want to give some counterpoints just for you to think about. Now, you may have heard some of these from a friend, someone has maybe disclosed to you in a professional way, or this could be your story. Whichever it is, just please take a minute and reflect on this. The first thing I've heard a lot is, oh, my story is not as bad as your story. I'm not even comfortable talking about it. It was nothing. When I was in treatment program, I was in there with someone who had a 15-second incident with a camp counselor, 15 seconds, and it had happened 5 years prior, and he was sitting next to me in the trauma room. It doesn't matter if it was 15 seconds or 15 years, trauma wounds, and it doesn't heal on its own. Well, it was only once. It was only once, maybe with you or with the person disclosing, but could it be more with someone else? It was only touching. Touching's inappropriate and it's not okay. Touching can lead to more than touching, and maybe it was only touching with you or with the other person. It was my dad, but it stopped. I think my story today has actually proven that that doesn't always mean it stopped. It might have stopped for you, but has it carried on with somebody else, a sibling, grandchildren? Well, it was my grandmother, but she is dead now. Think of all the people that may be carrying the same secret. If it was your grandmother, do you have cousins? Do you have siblings? What about your parents? Are they carrying that same secret? So what am I doing here in Northern Ireland? And what am I doing in what I call my second act after I've quit my big tech job and moved here? Well, I moved to Northern Ireland for love. A few years back, I met my partner in Washington State as we both worked for the same big tech company. As we got closer, he asked me, if you want to go support survivors, what are you doing working here? That's all it took, is for him to ask me that question for me to start to plan what that would look like. I quit my job. I talked to my kids, who I do have a good relationship with, my support team, my tribe, as I call them in the States, and got their support. And I packed my bags and I moved to Northern Ireland to be with my partner. I also enrolled at Ulster University, where I'm in my final semester of my dissertation that I am writing about ways that we can improve our trauma recovery program here in Northern Ireland. But one of the things that best happened to me is when I first got here, and this particular picture is right after I was, I would say, screaming over the River Lagan on a zip line, trying to raise money for Nexus. That led me to doing some other support volunteer work for them, and then actually led me to a job being their fundraising officer. That role was wonderful, but I will say it was also very frustrating. It was frustrating because I could not believe how many people had no idea who Nexus was, what they did, what they stood for. And it really made me realize people do not want to talk about it unless it's happening to them. And even then, they want to keep secrets about it. So that has given me some other observations about Northern Ireland that have actually already been talked about by the minister and by Siobhan, is we need to continue to raise our voices. We need to give voices to others, and we need to keep talking until we can't talk anymore about it. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my second act, is I want to speak about it and tell my story and I have multiple stories until people are sick of hearing from me or other survivors and the abuse is stopped. We should be putting perpetrators on notice. We're not taking it anymore, and we're not going to stay silent. A couple things. Jerry mentioned I am the Northern Ireland ambassador for an organization out of Florida. It's a worldwide organization, and really what it is, just a place to get resources. I'm also have started something that I'm very proud of, and that is an Ask a Adult Survivor of Child Abuse, any type of child abuse support meeting on Tuesday nights. And it's been going for about 10 weeks, and it's going very well. It's just a peer-to-peer support group that's facilitated and safe for people to tell their stories. In the future, after I graduate, I'm hoping to take my business experience, my schooling, and also my survivor story and my experience from the States and help influence changes in Northern Ireland to support recovery. So, quick call to action for you. If you are privileged enough to hear someone's story, please listen to them, believe them, and if appropriate, act. If this is your child's story, please believe them and act. And if this is your story, believe in yourself and find a safe place or a safe person you can call. And the helpline is one of those safe places that you can disclose your story. And if none of that applies to you, but you still want to take action based on this story today, you can donate your time, you can donate your money to either Victim Support or Nexus or any other organization that supports trauma recovery. Or you can just be an ally to us survivors by telling people you were at this conference, you heard us speak, etc. Thank you so much. It's odd to do this remotely, but I appreciate you all, and I am blessed to have done this today. These are some of my favorite resources that you'll probably hear more about in the next day and a half. Of course, the helpline, Nexus Victim Support, the NASCA and ASCA websites. And on October 30th of last year, I told more of my story and more details specifically about the justice piece of my story. And you can see that or hear that story on the NASCA.org website if you go look on October 30th. With that, if you have an inspiration to act today, or you just want to ask me more information about the ASCA meeting, please reach out to me. I hope I'm going to continue to be more vocal in the community. And with that, I will leave you with the warrior's prayer that is definitely on my heart. Thank you so much.